Welcome to the Pritchard Pub.
Tonight we have a very special guest, Timo, not fucking Timo, everyone. All right,
Timo.
Timo Burnham. Is that how you say it, or do you prefer Burnham?
I say Burnham, but you could say Burnham if you want.
Timo Burnham.
Oh yeah. So,
Baby, it's okay.
right off the bat, for those who don't know who you are, why don't you explain?
Explain yourself.
Explain what you do, what you're all about, all that.
I'm a writer. I write books, fiction, fantasy. I guess I haven't really written any sci-fi, so mostly just fantasy for now. And just published. Well, I guess it's pre-order right now, but new book just came out, Shadows Within, second book in my Silver Empire series, like an Asian-inspired fantasy series. So that is exciting and stressful. Yeah, there's book one, Dawn of the Black Sun.
Damn books ahead of time. Oh my gosh, that's right.
Yep.
So yeah, I noticed it was like an Eastern inspired thing. That's like one of the first impressions one can garner from like the cover and stuff. Is there a particular? Are you just a fan of like samurai stories and like Eastern stuff, or?
Yeah, it's probably just a collection of like I don't know what you'd call them, but like things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, sort of like the Zanzia type of stories where it's it's basically the Eastern version of like fantasy stories.
Hey.
Right. Where it's like you said, Crouching Tiger, it's like exaggerated, almost like fantasy in its own right, where there is like a magical element to it. It's whimsical.
Yeah, and it's usually kind of like the magic is focused on like your own connection to, like, they'll have like some word for it, like chi, or I think sometimes they just call it like Tao. But it's sort of like this idea of like you're perfecting yourself, your body to, I mean, in the stories, it's like superhuman abilities.
Well, like the idea of chi kind of prevails through all cultures. Well, not all cultures, I should say, but like there's many cultures around the world that like have some sort of idea of chi, right? Like how does yours work? Would this be like your magic system?
Yeah, one of the two. It's yeah, so I'm trying to think how to describe it without giving away big spoilers, because the way the magic system works is kind of a reveal in the series. But in the beginning, I'd say it's more or less straightforward. Like it's sort of like an internal energy, and through training and meditating, you can increase that energy, and essentially it makes you stronger, faster, more durable, improves your senses.
Yeah, like physical enhancement, basically.
Yeah. And then that's sort of like the base level, and then people who get to a lot higher levels, they develop individual abilities. A lot of them are like elemental manipulation. So if you look at the cover of the first book, you can see Zash and he's sort of channeling like green lightning around his fists, which is an ability that is exclusive to him that he has because he's at that high level of mastery, I guess you could say.
Oh yeah. I mean, to be able to like manifest anything really out of nothing would require some sort of, high level skill. You know what I mean? Even using like in real life, right? Let's take in real life, using your voice alone to like crack a glass, to like crack a cup, shatter a glass. That's kind of creating something. You're creating kind of like destruction out of nothing. All you're doing is like using your voice. I guess that's not nothing, but still, in and of itself seems magical. So, but yeah, that's the route I would go with. Like chi is, physical stuff. You're faster, you're stronger. That's seems to kind of be the lore in real life too. With it, like when you see people talk about it, whether in a real sense or not, it always does seem to just kind of be like, well, like take Dragon Ball Z for example. They're really just shooting they call it ki, ki in Dragon Ball Z. I'm sure obviously, but like kind of the same idea where it's like that's what makes them bulletproof. It's like kind of like why they're so strong. It's why they're able to fly. It's what they're shooting at each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the like elements of how the magic system works, it works that way because I wanted it to work that way for the series. So I know I wanted a magic system that allowed a normal person to be able to do really crazy stuff that would require their body to be like more durable and a lot stronger and faster than like a human would actually be able to. And so that was the reason. That's the reason that the magic system works that way, where the baseline is essentially just general enhancement of your like abilities, because you kind of need that for the second layer, which is these even crazier powers that people get.
So we kind of skipped over. So do you have kids? Are you a single guy, or where are you at with like as far as all of that in your life?
No kids. I'm currently single.
So you have
that was the questions.
Yeah. So you have lots of time then, or well, I shouldn't say that, but do you have a lot of free time then to write, or do you get enough hours?
Well, he was saying he was working earlier, so he works hard at a job.
Okay, so you work long hours and don't have that much time to write, or?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, even though I work a full-time job, you still have quite a bit of time in the week.
Yeah.
To write.
Yeah.
And
you
then
did
also,
it on breaks.
Yeah, I was doing it on my breaks and stuff.
Yeah. And then also with my specific job, I generally have some time while I'm at work to write as well. It
that's
depends.
awesome.
Depends on the day. So if it's like really busy, I might not have time. But
generally,
I do have time.
That's awesome.
I heard Brandon Sanderson talk about this idea of like what job you have, and how compatible it is, for those aspiring to write. And he said that more blue collar, like hardworking factory type jobs are more compatible for writers because it uses a different part of your brain. And like though you're more physically exhausted, like your muscles and stuff. I mean, I feel like that translates to mentally too. So like, I don't know, it's kind of a slippery slope in my mind because telling people to go work really, really hard to the point of exhaustion could affect their motivation to write, for starters. But I know my writing quality suffered when I was like exhausted. But I do kind of see what he's saying as far as like that line of work using a different part of your brain, because like burnout is real behind a desk as well, right? If you're like writing and using that writing center of your brain all day, then when you get home, you've already been doing that all day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably not just with work, but in general, the best thing for writing is being bored. Because when you're bored, your mind will start working, and
That's so true. It's so true.
You'll start coming up with ideas, or just thinking about, whatever story, or not even the story you're working on, some other story. That's usually what happens with me, is I come up with an idea for some other story that I'm not working on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's not fun to be bored, but it's really useful if you want to write.
Or has there ever been a time where you got a story seed that you just wanted to quit your current project and jump to that?
Oh yeah, all the time, because I always want to work on whatever I'm not working on.
But have you ever done it?
I guess technically once, but I wanted to quit, and I kept going for like 3 more months, and then after those 3 months, I was like, okay, yeah, this story is just not working, and this other story, I really want to work on this other story instead. And so at that point, I was like, all right, I've given it a try to keep going, and it still didn't work, so I'm gonna go ahead and give up. But I try really hard not to do that, because that is always going to be your that's going to be what you want to do, is you're going to want to quit and work on the new thing because it seems more fun than what you're working on. And it's not really, it's just the way that your like people's psychology works.
Yeah.
But like the grass is always greener. Like that new story seems like it's going to be better. It seems like it's going to be easier to write. It seems like you're going to enjoy it more. But that's just because it's what you're not working on. And once you switch to that, you're going to have the same problems you had with the current story. So I think it's good to resist that urge as much as you can, unless you're really sure that the story you're working on just isn't working.
Yeah, the grass is always greener where you water it.
Yeah. And those stories that distract you happen to be the ones that you're dreaming about, and your dreams always seem better than reality. And you're dreaming about it to begin with, because that's how your mind works, and that's why you're an author. So what you got to do is you got to catch that dream. You got to catch it, and then you got to tuck it away and keep working on the one in front of you.
It's good to recognize when something isn't working.
Yeah,
like
that's
you said, though.
Yeah. It's good to recognize when something's working, and it's hard to recognize when it's not working, because a lot of times it's not that it's not working, it's that you have just been working on it for a while, and you lost the initial motivation, which is normal, and it just feels like hard work.
Yeah.
So it's hard to tell the difference between that and between like lack of motivation and the story actually just not working.
Yeah.
And you can learn that with just experience, but that takes a while to get.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why it's so important to do at least a little bit every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I told you that wasn't this. Okay. So that's another.
I thought it was.
That's what
I see. Welcome. Let's take a minute to address the chat here. We got Allison Wade in the chat. We got Usagi Tenshi in the chat. Hail. Welcome.
Hail,
thank you, guys.
Everyone.
Thank you for coming. And then we also have let's see here. We got Bad Sauce in the chat and C. Shelton Art in the chat. Thank you guys all for making it out. But yeah, where did we leave off? I'm sorry. I always like to
stories.
Yeah, stories. What were you saying? Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say we were talking about like when to quit, give up on a story, or when not to.
Yeah, if it's becoming a detriment, a resource sink, you're really not enjoying it. 'Cause I mean, like that That's a tricky one though too, because some people could use the really not enjoying it thing as an excuse to just not finish. Like like some big names that we've seen recently in the news. Looking at you, George Martin and Rothfuss and the others. You know what I mean? They could just be like, I'm not having fun. But I don't know. They started it. What do you think about that? Where it's to the point where you really don't want to do it anymore. It's not fun, but you're on that level. You're on that level where it's like your career, right? What do you do?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my thought would be you try to figure out what you need to do to get it done. Like, if you can't do it the normal way you've been doing it, you gotta I don't know, find someone to help you or do something different. But
yeah.
I mean, specifically with those people like Rothfuss and Martin, I personally wouldn't really care if they didn't finish, as long as they just told people they weren't going to finish, just said, hey, I just don't feel like writing anymore. I would be like, all right, that's fine with me. I think the thing that bugs me about them is that they never say anything about it, but then they get mad if people are mad that they haven't written more. It's well, people are mad because you haven't said that you don't want to write. You had told them that you just don't like writing the story anymore, so they think you're just wasting time doing nothing.
Right. So that actually brings up another good point in transparency, right? Because I'm pretty sure I agree with you that let's just take the big names, right? Rothfuss and Martin. Even right now, after all this time of procrastinating and everybody giving them shit, if they came out and they were like, okay, guys, listen, I am going to tell you the truth right now. I have not been writing because I don't like writing anymore. It pains me. And if they transparently explained that it's torture for them to write at the moment, it's what are we going to do? Make them torture them and make them do it anyway? If they were if they were hey, I'm willing to teach somebody, explain everything to them right now while I'm still alive and walk them through it, essentially ghostwrite, like you're saying, admit the things, and talk about how they feel a little bit and just kind of be like, I'm going to be honest with you, I just don't want to do it anymore. I think a lot of people would still be butthurt, but a lot more people would forgive them and be actually really excited to see the next person come out and unfold,
Yeah. And I mean, I would have a lot more respect for them if they just did that. I mean, even they don't even have to say I'm never going to write it. If they just if George just said hey, the reason it's been 10 a decade or whatever is because I just haven't been motivated and I didn't feel like writing it. He's that's why I'm going so slow. I would have more respect for him than just not telling people anything other than oh yeah, I'm still writing it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would have more respect for those types if they were doing that, and it's the transparency thing. Whenever I get into indie talk with people, I always bring up transparency as a key, a golden rule for success in the indie sphere. It seems like the most transparent people, that are willing to pull their screen up and they're showing you personal things like finances and stuff even. People generally seem to gravitate to that, oh man, this person is actually being pretty honest right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a big thing that people like about an indie author is that they are they're just like another person. So they feel instead of you reading George R. R. Martin's books, who's this, I mean, you don't know him personally. He's just this sort of author celebrity, right? Instead, you have just, a guy that just could be your neighbor or your friend or something.
Right.
And so you can get to know them really well, and they they're not you know, super rich or anything. Like they have like a normal lifestyle like you know, they might have a job like you, stuff like that.
Right,
So,
right.
like, I think that's a big thing that people connect to with like indie authors, where they can't really get that with like the big traditionally published people.
Oh yeah, and it's like a missed opportunity to get close to the creators. You know, I saw this all the time in the music industry. A new band would get signed, and the smart labels would milk every second of that until their first show or whatever. You know, like vlogs of them talking about stuff, random videos of them doing stupid stuff. You know, all leading up to the actual stuff. You know what I mean? I'm gonna send my wife a StreamYard link here, just so she can take care of the kiddo. He is in a rough attitude, if that makes sense.
Rambunctious mood.
Yeah. If yeah. So bear with me. Why don't you go ahead and walk us through, like, what's your first book about?
You talking about the first book in the series, Dawn of the Black Sun?
Yes, Dawn of the Black Sun. That name always catches my eye too, because just the idea of a black sun. I could go on and on with that. But yeah, just like walk us through it.
Yeah, so that's Dawn of the Black Sun. Obviously, it's the first book. There is a lot of setting up. It kind of follows two storylines. One is the main character, or I guess you call him. So he's the main character, the good guy, and then you have the second story, which is the villain. But the way that the storylines are set up, they're actually, it's not really like a hero villain storyline. It's more like dual protagonists, and one of them is the bad protagonist, one of them is the good protagonist.
Yeah.
Because you're following both of them on two journeys for most of the book. And in the Ryu, the good protagonist, I guess.
Yeah.
He's actually going on like a literal journey because he's trying to go to the tallest mountain on the continent, to the top of the tallest mountain.
That's a good goal.
Yeah, and then
Good
you have the exile, is what he's called at the beginning. You find out his actual name at the very end of the book, unless you guess it earlier. If you guess the twist earlier, but
I like that. I have a character just referred to as the Wolf, and until his actual name is revealed through memories at the end of the book. So,
nice. Yeah, it's kind of a similar thing like that. When you write like that, it's a little awkward sometimes.
Yep.
When you're trying to write sentences, because you can't.
Yep.
Because usually you would just use their name.
Yeah.
And you can't, so you're always like, you got these clunky phrases where you're like, the exile. But
yeah.
But I digress.
Or those moments where you're like, where he's like doing the same thing, so it's like the exiled. It's like, oh shit, I can't say that.
Oh
yeah. Yeah. And you capitalized it. There's that whole thing too, like capitalization, just the way it fits in the sentence. There's a lot of like weird nuances that you don't think of right away just by wanting to refer to them as like not their name, you know. It's like
yeah. And so I don't really spoil stuff, but so later on too, there's another character who his name is the Black Sun, and that's not a title, that's his name.
Sick.
And that is also awkward to write.
The Black Sun. Yeah, because just sun can have like a double meaning and stuff like that. I could see that.
Yeah. Well, I just mean more like literally, because you're like if you just writing POV with him, right? And you're going to be writing, because normally it would be like John, but if you're writing the Black Sun, it gets repetitive really fast.
Yeah, it's multiple. Yeah. 3 words compared to like 1, and like the number of syllables and stuff like that. Yeah, it really adds up.
Yeah. And Daniel P. Riley edited the second book, and that was something that he was mentioning to me. He's like, yeah, it gets kind of old when you have to keep saying this guy's name over and over again. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely things you can do to make it not so bad, but it's tough when it's like not like it's literally like what he goes by. He doesn't have another name.
Did he have a title?
I think some of his like lieutenants maybe just refer to him as like master or something, but
yeah, sometimes you can get by saying like the master or the lord or the soldier. Refer to him.
I think some stuff I do is I just kind of give him a descriptor. Yeah, they say that instead of just saying his name, just to cut out some of the repeat.
Yeah, and it's like if you could at least put a sentence in between the uses. That's it. I mean, I found that's at least good enough. You know what I mean? Because then you're not. I think it feels so much more repetitive when it's back-to-back sentences, and then the next stage up from that is how many are in the same paragraph, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But this is like writer talk. This is actually pretty dry writer talk right now. I mean, it's
cool that we can have
nuts
and bolts, kind of like boring, like.
It's cool that we can talk about it. I never really get to talk about this stuff with people, to be honest, but it's like I'm not alone out there,
Yeah.
But yeah, how about like some inspirations, like still let's stick to like the writing, but like how about the story? Like what are some of the more colorful aspects of the story? Like what are the core things that like you're delivering? You know what I mean? Like what are some colorful themes that you just like really love about your story that you just like can't help but think about all the time while you're writing it?
I
feel like that's a little more interesting.
I think probably, I don't know if this was actually something I was thinking a lot about, but it's probably just because I'm naturally like interested in it, so I don't have to just be like consciously just thinking about adding it in. But it's just the idea, more broadly, like the idea of like masculinity and what does it mean to be a man, and then more specifically in this first book, what is the journey from boyhood to manhood?
Yes.
And I think I don't really in the book like very strongly try to tell the reader what I think, but you kind of see Ryu make that transition in book 1, kind of against his will. Like bad things happen at the beginning of the book to him, and then he kind of has to step in. He kind of has to step over the threshold from boyhood and into manhood and learn, what life is like as a man versus a boy. And
right
then into book 2, he starts to deal with other things, because then he's in book 1, he's just with like one other person who's an adult, and so he has to deal with certain things, but mostly it's like, the physical danger of like being out in the wild, stuff like that. Whereas in book 2, he's around people his age, and so he's dealing with like, how do you interact with girls or other rival guys? Like how do I deal with them and stuff like that?
Yeah. No, I like that. That's actually kind of like what I'm doing with my my free stuff, spirit animals, the all ages stuff I'm doing. It's like the protagonist is like a kid, because I like the idea of vulnerable protagonists. The protagonist in my novel is a pregnant woman, And Spirit Animals is a kid. The 3 characters from my my anthology pulp, my pulp anthology on Amazon right now, you know, each of them is less vulnerable, I would say. Actually, those are the 3 least vulnerable characters I've written, but I think there's something to just something inherent about like a pregnant woman or a child, you know what I mean, that like adds a certain level of like, I got to see what happens with this character kind of thing. But maybe that's not the right way to put it. I don't know. Either way, I think I plan on like having this kid grow up. You know, I don't have like an end in sight for that story. That's kind of the whole point of it, is it's free and I can just always write another episode whenever, you know. It'd be cool to have him grow up right before our eyes, though, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I planned out this series, is that you get to kind of watch Ryu. I mean, he starts off, he's 17 at the beginning of the first book, but he's kind of just on the cusp of adulthood, and you kind of get to see him physically grow up, but also like all the struggles of being an adult, and specifically, you know, being a man, and then kind of because of who he is in this world, he has a lot more struggles because he ends up with a lot more responsibility than the average person would. And so then he's dealing with like, you know, how to act when you have like a lot of power, a lot of responsibility, a lot of ability to change the world if you want, and things like that.
How to handle power responsibly.
Yeah, and how to deal with, you know, bad guys who have as much or more power than you.
So I've never done this with a guest or even another author, really. Oh, Mama Pritchard's back. Here, let me add her back. But okay, so I have similar themes in my stories where it's like delving into the use of power, right? A little bit more on the mature theme instead of like a boy figuring it out. I'll probably touch on that with Zan in Spirit Animals, but as far as like Mortal Descent on Amazon, I'll just take like, let's see, I'll take Votisa, Queen Votisa as example. She is, you know, her husband basically goes out to war. It's established like in the history of the story and stuff like that. And basically he dies. It's like this whole event, and she kind of becomes the queen, and you know, gets bestowed this magical object, and essentially goes on to kind of rally her people, forge a nation, and then the whole purpose is to go to war, like we've seen historically in real life, because the story is actually based off of Boudica, the story of Boudica, if you're familiar with Queen Boudica from history. So the examination there is like what people will do with power. Like she could have rallied her people and done something different, right? But like the way I portray it also like is actually I follow history for the most part, but like the angle I portray it from like kind of frames it like an eye for an eye, or like those who seek revenge should dig two graves kind of thing. What you do with power, this kind of touches on it, you know, because she takes literal power in the form of like the magical object and then uses it essentially to conquer, and and when she could have just stopped at any point in time during that and taken what she gets, and you know, goes home with the victory. She just keeps going and going and going until it's eventually stopped.
It won't let me connect to YouTube on my StreamYard app so I can fucking chat. That's pissing me off.
Oh, that's a bummer. Yeah, I think that's like one eventuality when it comes to power, right? Is people tend to just go with it until they're physically forced to stop.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Gotta
Do you,
be kidding me.
how does he examine the power? You know,
I'm done.
responsibly holding the power. You know?
I mean, I think it's something where like because he ends up being an exceptional person, and so when you're an exceptional person, you have the capacity to affect the world in ways that normal people can't. And I guess you could just not. But in this story, what you have is you have an extremely exceptional villain, and he very much is wanting to affect the world in a lot of ways. And you have then the main character on the other side of that opposing it, and he is also exceptional. But being exceptional kind of means, right? You're sort of you're holding yourself to a different standard than everyone else. So you are kind of taking on like this huge responsibility that no one else like would even be able to take on. Like a normal person wouldn't be able to. Like they literally don't have like the mental or physical or whatever capabilities to take on something like that. And so like that's something that he struggles with, just because like I think it's something anyone would struggle with, like because you know he's exceptional, but he's also a human, and he doubts himself, and he he's not sure, like people will say, oh, you're exceptional, but then he doesn't necessarily feel that he is himself, because he has his own view of who he is, and in some ways he feels like he's a normal person.
Yeah, and he still came from somewhere,
Yeah, I mean in his mind, he in some ways he still sees himself as like the fisherman's son who lived in the cove, at the beginning of the story. And so
and Bad Sauce makes a good point here. It's one theme I think is like kind of what you're driving at here. If everyone exceptional, then no one is. And my thought I was going to add to that is it's also the duty of like the exceptional people to rise up and kind of police each other in the case of the exceptional villain, right?
Yeah, and I mean in this case, because you have these people who like essentially at the highest level are like demigods in terms of like what they can do. They're you have to have the good demigods there to stop the bad ones, like because the normal people can't do anything otherwise, like
right.
And so you have this character who he starts off the story as one of the normal people, and then he grows over the course of the series into this incredibly powerful he becomes a hero, like in the ancient Greek sense kind of thing. Right. But then he has to deal with everything that comes with it, all the responsibility.
Those who have the ability to take action should take action because they have the responsibility to do it, because they're exceptional, right? And there's few exceptional people in this case. So thus, it's like the Superman thing. Now, like in the case of Queen Votisa, the entire purpose of her character was to kind of show, like, not only did it actually happen in real life, right? That's just a good model to start from, to start exploring these ideas, right? And it really was just a showcase of how people will prop up other people to an almost false religious what's the term you use? Standard, to like almost a false religious standard, and then they abuse that power. It's like an end case result that they'll just inevitably keep going until they hit a wall. You know what I mean? That absolute power will corrupt absolutely until the until the point of like destruction. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of her purpose, though. Just like this doomed journey, right? We're gonna watch this because she comes from royalty, gets everything, and everybody around her props her up, but then she ends up crashing with it. It's like a inverse character arc, right?
Like just a like negative character arc.
Right, and different purposes behind the examination of power. That's why I bring it up. It's like a different take on kind of like similar ideas, delving into handling power, right? I have another character, Hyman Horfist. He's a jarl that is becoming king. All he has to do is deliver the king to a faraway place so that he can die on his own terms. And the deal is he gets the kingship, becomes king, right? And it's like a Viking story. They all, so he has his sons with him, just like the Vikings would, and all that. And they go to this faraway place that's kind of a stand-in for like the New World, The king has been there though before, so that's how he knows it exists and wants to die there and stuff like that. So the whole thing turns into like an allegory of fatherhood that I didn't consciously try to write. It's like parenting and like living and dying on your own terms and stuff like that, but also another examination of power, because the Jarl gets handed the title of king, and along with it all these different colorful characters that come along with it in the form of the king's like entourage and stuff like that. Some of them are really good, some of them are not the best people, right? And basically you get to kind of see what ambition, it's like cultural ambition, right? Because like the king is reminiscing, or the Jarl's reminiscing the entire time about like past great deeds, and he kind of goes over in his mind all the great deeds of everybody, all the characters he comes across. So there's the living on your own terms thing. They've done all these things, and some of them can be interpreted in good ways and bad ways, but at the end of the day, the point is driven across that, hey, this character is ambitious. He even has his sons with him because like you need witnesses that bad and stuff like that. There's a lot of like nuance to it, but at the end of the day, an ambitious character is gonna keep trying to attain bigger and bigger ambitious things. So when the entire mission goes haywire after the fact, he has power, but it's kind of the same thing where he runs it into the ground. Like it's not like he's corrupted, but it's just like he's handed a situation. In this case, he's handed a situation. Queen Votisa chooses every step along the way. She rallies her army, marches through a city and toward the capital and stuff like that. But like Hyman, it's less of a choice and more of like revenge, like because they return from the journey from the king, leaving the king once he's finally got this new title, and they find the camp attacked already. Like many of their friends are like dead in various ways, and it's like a revenge scene, but he doesn't. So it's like kind of how do you morally handle like a situation like that too once you've been given power? Because like I like to think he's not a terrible dude the entire story, but at the end he starts making terrible choices. I frame him as a very good guy, actually, like and a caring father that's just actually trying to kind of do his duty, even if he doesn't like fully agree with the king. He doesn't want to be here necessarily, but once he becomes king and stuff starts happening to him, now suddenly he feels a certain way, and it's usually like anger, and he lashes out. You know what I mean? It's another examination of it, because like how would your character, the ideal of your character, and you don't have to spoil anything with your story, but how would your character handle kind of just like returning and finding essentially just like your home, your home has been ravaged, and like people that you love, just imagine like a really bad scenario like that. would justifiably fill a person with rage, how would they react to that?
I'm trying to think because that's essentially what happens to him in the book. So it's not really, we don't have to imagine it because I mean what he does in the first book is he takes vengeance on the people who killed his loved ones.
He goes all Anakin on him.
And I mean, I think incredibly justifiably so.
Yeah.
And then what immediately happens after that is he kind of realizes that, you know, he's got his vengeance, but that there's nothing that's going to bring back his family. And so essentially he's going to live the rest of his life kind of with the pain and loss of what's happened to him. And then throughout, you know, the rest of the book, and then, you know, going in through book 2 as well, you know, he carries that pain with him, and he has actually a necklace that he wears, and that's kind of the like physical symbol for him of what he's lost and kind of why he's doing what he's doing, you know, as the story goes further on.
Well, and a necklace is a good symbol too, because it's almost like an anchor that he wears around his neck. It's a chain, right? Symbolism with that. Slave collars, like a literal collar, like a dog collar, right? A leash. There's all the symbolism that can go into just simply wearing a necklace. And depending on what the emblem at the end looks like, is it on this book here?
Yeah, you can see it on the book cover. He's wearing it. So it's a seashell, actually.
It's a seashell. Okay, my phone's off. But yeah, so it's like a circular seashell.
Yeah.
So there's obviously more symbolism there. Like there's animals like the hermit crab that use shells as their home. So it's like he's wearing his home as an anchor around his neck, and it's all, you know what I'm saying? A piece of his home, right? There's a lot of stuff like that. And I mean, I'm probably looking way further deeper than it needs to be. But
there's a lot of symbolism because it was given to him by this girl who was his neighbor back at his home, and there was like a little bit of like a romantic thing going on between them, and then she ends up getting killed. This kind of stuff happens at the beginning of the first book, and she had given him the necklace as a gift, you know, like the day before, I think, or maybe even on the day, but she'd given him the necklace as a gift, and so that kind of is his. It's the last thing he has of her, basically, to carry around. But it becomes kind of for him the symbol for all the loved ones that he lost. So
I kind of hit the nail on the head with the anchor, the chain, the collar, the weight, the home, even the home with the seashell, the home. Did you realize that when you made it a seashell with like hermit crabs? And
no, the reason it's the seashells because they live on the beach, and so it was something that she would be able to find to give to him.
Yeah.
Also, I scarred Evely with the beginning of the book, so he is now.
Did you have apes
Dan,
attacking humans?
I'm not sure exactly. All he told me was he started the book and then it was too dark for him and he had to stop.
Oh no, you must have had a lot of apes then. We've been giving him shit this week because he says apes are creepy, so that's why he won't vote for Planet of the Apes. So he's definitely team Mad Max all the way. Shout outs. For those of you listening, go on the Ultimate Kahuna's Twitter page, find the the poll for our video this week and vote. There's still time for humanity. You can save us. Vote Mad Max for your children and for women everywhere.
Apes are really creepy, especially when they're like way too smart.
Yeah, he said they're like pseudo humans that are like hairy pseudo humans that just like creep him out, which I totally get. That's us as vote. I'm gonna have to agree. I have to agree with him. Oh yeah, he says it's intense out of the gate, and it was like 7:30 in the morning. So rough way to start out.
Yeah. Reading that chapter that he's talking about is probably not the best way to start your day if you want to feel good.
Is it in book 1, the one we have?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's I think it's chapter 1 because there's the prologue chapter and then it goes into chapter 1. Oh no, it's not. That was in the first draft. It's chapter 2 because I broke it up.
Gotcha.
But
Is this the event?
The
Is this the event that?
Yeah, it's the big inciting incident for the main character. Yeah, when everything goes bad.
Before we move on to like a different subject, on the subject of this, I'm really actually kind of proud of myself for identifying the symbolism that your subconscious put into that that necklace. Because like so I think it would be really cool if it's not too late already, right? If there's a moment where his past no longer defines him, he's no longer a slave to himself and the deeds he's done, and he's fully matured and come to age, even if it's against his will. If this chain around his neck or his necklace breaks at some point, or he willingly takes it off for whatever reason, that could be another huge symbolic event, and you could also foreshadow that event too in a lot of different ways. I just think that would personally be like kind of a cool thing. I imagine in my mind, once the seed is set there of all this necklace that has all the symbolism around, I'm just like, you could do a lot of cool things with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely can. I don't know if I have an exact plan. I have some ideas.
Yeah. I mean,
of what I want to do. I mean, I generally, when I'm thinking really far ahead in the series, I'm mainly like thinking of like the big moments, like the kind of stuff that, like stand up and cheer or like whatever, those kind of things that are going to happen to characters. So.
Right. Spider-Man gets bit. Spider-Man, learns how to web for the first time. Spider-Man fights Green Goblin. Major events, right? Basically, yeah. Something to keep in the back of your mind, though. Just like that necklace is cool.
Yeah, I always kind of think. I don't usually have like an actual list, but I kind of keep a list in my head with characters of like what are the big things that define them, like. And so for Ryu, his necklace would be one, right? But
yeah,
really what it is what it symbolizes. And so
it's that anchor, it's that chain.
I was going to say, I don't see the necklace in this cover. And then I was like, oh, that guy.
Right in the
wrong guy.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the wrong guy.
That tells you about the lightning hands drawing attention. I mean, that does draw attention for sure.
Yeah. Oh, Evely he's going to try reading the book again.
I can't quit you, Timo, sorry. I knew I would say it once at least.
Fucking asshole.
I know, I'm a douche.
Yeah.
So
once you get past that part, Evely, it's not quite so intense for a little while.
Yeah, those parts are usually there for a reason. Some authors do it in bad taste. I've been told that there's a couple parts in my released book that are a little brutal, and I know for a fact that even though I don't directly go into detail describing some stuff in my actual novel, just the fact that some certain things happen behind the scenes or like off screen, and like the situation kind of unfolds the way it does, might give people the, just kind of like, you know what I mean? So yeah. I need to like polish that. I need to buff it, knock a few dents out, and kind of bring that back. But there's a few scenes, a couple I should say, in my actual release stuff that people have said that is pretty brutal.
Yeah, that's how it is with this book. Like, I purposely don't show anything, so basically he sees it after the fact, and he finds out like what happens, and there I think I have like one line where basically Ryu realizes what's happened to someone else, and I try to keep it as vague as I can. And partially my thought was like if a younger kid was reading this and they didn't actually understand certain things, they might not even realize at all what had happened to people.
That's the goal.
Yeah, because I really I wasn't trying to write a really horrible scene just for the sake of a horrible scene. Like, I'm not trying to shock people just to like because I can.
You need to rip the Mary Sue Band-Aid off immediately. You're like, here's this character. Boom! Slap across the face. Now let's see him recover from that. Let's go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just a storytelling device. Some people do get knocked out from that initial slap, though. If that
Yeah,
makes
I mean,
sense.
and I totally get it. If that scene is like, if you don't like that scene, you don't want to keep reading, that's fine with me. You know, I tried really hard to make it so I'm not just trying to like shock value, like make it horrible. But you know, if that's not the kind of thing you want to read about it, I definitely understand.
Right. Just know it's temporary.
Yeah.
The book would be labeled as like horror or something if it wasn't temporary.
Yeah, and that is the worst part of the whole book, is that beginning part. Like, Ryu, he has lots of obstacles, lots of things that he struggles with, lots of, you know, painful things happen, but that inciting event that completely changes his entire life, that's the worst part, and that happens at the beginning.
Oh, Votisa completely commits a war crime right off the bat. And that's just reflective of what you know, the real story, you know. She went from city to city and like even sacked London and stuff like that back in the day. But I do it in a very like, it's like leading up to it. Like the very first line is alone, comma. So alone is the first word. That's the first word I ever published, by the way. The first word I ever published in a book is alone. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. You ever look back at like the first word you ever published? Have you ever done that? It might be interesting. Just like, the first word.
It would be whatever's the first word in The Black Saint, which is my first book that I published. Which I don't know because I haven't looked at that book in forever.
Right. Going back and looking at it.
What's yours?
Alone. The word alone. But anyway, the line is alone, Queen Votisa, you know, emerged from the forest. So it's like right off the bat, the first sentence is saying this queen is walking out here alone. That's weird. Why is a queen alone? You know what I mean? And then it just kind of like, it like unfolds, you know, and it just like leads up to like the reveal of magic when she's confronted by some guards at this city gate. She like walks up to a city completely alone, an entire walled city. And the guards come up. I reveal the magic. She like tangles them up in some roots and doesn't kill them, brings them along because they're actually going to fuel her next like spell, quote unquote. It's like, and which is to blow open the front gate. And then once that happens, the entire army appears from the forest and rushes in. So it's just like you get to see a city die right off the bat. And I even take it a step further. I think this is one of my most brutal scenes, and people might not catch it at first. It's when she's using the magic of her, you know, the magical object she has. Basically, what she does is she uses vibrational waves in the form of like her voice with this magical neck band, right? And it causes like the plant life to like, she can control plants, essentially. You know what I mean? So she goes to the city. She goes to the city that humans have built over a forest. So there's all these roots underneath the ground, and essentially awakens all the roots underneath their temple, and like destroys the temple with the roots. But the whole description of like the roots crawling all over the temple is very much like somebody killing somebody else. It's just like the roots are very much like bearing
like
down. Yeah, the roots are like bearing down on the temple, and the temple's like coughing and like moaning and whining and like collapsing under the weight. And the whole thing is just very unsettling, actually, if you pick up on that. I think that's my most brutal scene, personally.
Yeah.
You'd say that beginning, though, is your most brutal?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, a big part of the reason I decided to write that the way I did is because I wanted to show like the bad guys kind of portray them honestly. Like these are not just bad guys. Like these are the worst of bad guys. Like these are criminals who have been exiled from the land because of how terrible they are, and they've been branded, as exiles because these are literally the worst of the worst people.
Right.
And now they've kind of found their way back, and they know they're horrible people. They don't care. They just want to do whatever they can get away with. And so I wanted to show, like what would a group of guys that are that horrible do?
They would do a lot, and you can find historical evidence, real historical evidence.
They would do a lot, and they do terrible things, and I don't show any of it, but you kind of see the aftermath of it, and
yeah, for sure.
From people's reaction, I think definitely some people it's a little too dark for them. I think most people have not had any complaints with it, but that is one thing that sometimes people will say. They're like, "Oh, why'd you have to put that in there?" And I'm like, I get it, but I kind of felt like that was.
It happens, bro.
Yeah,
it's fucking
it was
life,
just
man.
Like I try to let the stories be honest as much as I can. Like obviously I have outlines and plans.
Yeah.
But
you think it was pretty when Boudica sacked London? What about the 3 or 4 other cities, before and after that? You think she spared anybody? No. And she's like a great queen to her people, like a great warrior queen, you know what I mean? Reveled, like a great figure of feminism too. And I mean, I can't blame them. I think she's fucking badass, but this is a great example of you have one person who's clearly out of their mind for what kind of seems like a justified reason with Rome being Rome, right? And oppressing people, but there's still good and evil in the world. So killing civilians, it's a fine line. And she eventually met the wall that stopped her, which was the Roman legion on a gentle slope with enough time to be prepared. And I think that's just a great example because the Romans aren't the good guys in that situation, and neither is she. It's a fantastic example of a truly gray story. Who do you root for? Do you root for Rome being brutally massacred, or do you root for or do you root for her because Rome has been persecuting them? Usually still her, but I know. I digress.
Yeah. Well, in the case of this story too, I think the other thing that I really wanted to make sure was I wanted you to not sympathize with these guys at all.
Yep.
So that when the main character takes vengeance on them, you aren't thinking oh, am I thinking he's a good guy or is he a bad guy now that he's killing? It's no, you are sure he's doing the right thing by killing these guys.
Yeah, because it could be implied that they will do it again. They've done it before and they will keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, or you could potentially think oh, is he just becoming as bad as them by killing them? And the answer is no. At least that was what I wanted it to come across. It's no, you are ridding the world of pure evil. It's not at all the same thing.
That was the next point I was going to make is there's a certain threshold on the good side where you can only be so good, right? Which is pure, purity, right? Total purity. And then that's it. It's almost there's a ceiling of total purity. But then beyond that is this level of wrathfulness where you need to be able to protect yourself and hold on to those you love. And that is actually doing more goodness through violence, unfortunately. And you can see this through animals protecting their babies, mama bear protecting. I mean, lions, the dads will kill baby lions, so mom has to be get the fuck away. You know what I mean? Rival children are murdered all the time in the animal kingdom. So I digress, but you see that you do need to be capable of a certain level in order to actually combat evil, right? Darkness.
Yeah.
So you do need this sort of baptism in blood, even for good characters. Is there something to point at for Superman? I'm just trying to think of a very ultimately archetypical good character. Is there we'll call it the baptism of blood. Is there a baptism of blood for Superman? Or is he just good?
I don't know. I'm not super familiar with all of Superman's stories, so I'm not the best person to ask. I mean, I think he like previous versions of him are much more like that kind of pure good type character.
Yeah. No baptism. Yeah. Because like he just lands, I think. I don't know. Maybe he witnessed some things, but like he kind of lands and just gets adopted by like humans. Like, yeah, it's sad because he never had a father. I think he viewed some like old recordings, some old podcasts his dad made, and that's about all he knows. And I think he's just like he just decided to be a good guy, which is cool. But I think in real life, you do have to see some shit, and in order to be capable, like how is it almost makes Superman come off like he's afraid to kill people, which he is actually. The more I think about it, he is afraid of his own power, isn't he? The more I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard for me to like discuss this stuff because there's lots of different stories of Superman, lots of different takes on him. So I'm not sure exactly like which one is like the Superman, because I'm sure there's stories where there's been so many stories now. You could probably think of one where he's done everything.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think like kind of the idea of him is just the archetype of the pure good like hero.
Yeah.
And in that case, he.
Because what's a real life hero? The first thing I think of is like firefighter. It's that dude in the battalion that like had the balls to jump into the nest of Nazis and mow them all down and got shot 13 times himself, but saved his whole battalion or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And like allowed the war to end or like allowed the battle to end. Stuff like that. Self-sacrifice is like what I think of. And for a truly morally good person to engage in murder, taking the life of another creature or person, well, to specify, it is kind of self-sacrificing because they're sacrificing their ideals to do what needs to be done. And I don't know what to call that higher level of doing what needs to be done. I don't know what to call that. Because morally, it's definitely not necessarily good, but it's the right thing. Yeah. It's not good, but it's right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like the distinction of like good man versus a great man. Like a great man, like Genghis Khan was a great man, but you may not think he was a good man. Like he, I'm trying to think what's another example of a great man.
Wait, are you like Julius Caesar? Like Columbus. These people.
Yeah, like they're like these are very like I said before, like exceptional men who got things done in a way that no one else could. And that's, like I said, that's kind of something that I explore in the books. I always try to keep that kind of stuff as something that you can or you can pick up on if you want to or if you're paying attention to, but I'm never trying to like push themes really hard. I just kind of let them kind of emerge.
Yeah.
To the degree that a person wants to pick them out of the story, they can do that. But I think just very naturally the story explores the ideas of, or I guess it sort of puts forth the idea that the world is shaped by great men. Sometimes they are horrible great men, and sometimes they are heroic great men.
Yeah. Because in the wake of Genghis Khan, there was a lot of civilization that happened. Hospitals, medicine, technology spreading. In the wake of mountains of bones and muddy earth from all the blood. Like, yeah. Out of that destruction birthed civilization. It's like a fire spreading, really. These great people are terrible, but stuff happens around it. And I mean, how could it not? Like, when you're ending lines and burning cities to the ground, deleting entire cities off the map, like just lick your thumb, smear. That's not there anymore. You know what I mean? Like, geez, dude, it's actually pretty crazy to think about. all those ripples. Yeah, of course, stuff is going to happen around it. But yeah, is it great or terrible? Alexander, for example, he was just expansionist, right? Very much just a Chad that was like, I'm going to conquer the world, bro. And that's what happened. Like, and he didn't stop. And it was very much like, are you familiar with Alexander? Do you have like wars? Do you have like wars happening, war scenes in your book?
There hasn't been any like big battles yet, but there definitely will be. Yeah, at the moment, I think there's been like small skirmishes. It's generally not a lot of what's happened because so some characters are like basically normal people and other characters are like superpowered. They're essentially superheroes, and so you have a lot of the fights are like very one-sided because you have these superheroes just like killing random citizens very easily.
Yeah, which is kind of okay. Like, think about a knight walking around a dirty, poor serf village. Nobody there has a sword, even maybe like some pitchforks, maybe an old sword passed down in a couple families, but they sure as hell don't have like full armor or like a well-fed, well-hydrated steed that they're sitting 6 feet off the ground with their huge lance that they barely even have to move and they poke your head off with. You know what I mean? It's kind of a similar thing where they're almost like a superhuman just because of the technology, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, in this case, it would probably be more like if the knights had like firearms and then they were dealing with peasants, like the difference in like power that they have. But yeah, I mean, a lot of why I'm doing that is I'm really building up and selling the reader on like, you want the villains to feel extremely dangerous and scary. And like, there's nothing that, a normal person can do. Like, there's a reason why you need the heroes.
I just watched Wrangler's recent video that he did. It's kind of like a death battle of sorts, but he took Iron Age authors and put them up against the villains from this new book, The Fourth Wing. I haven't read or heard anything about it. I've heard that it's bad. I'll be honest with you. I don't know anything about it, but he took these villains. I think they're called the Venom, and he was taking various characters from certain Iron Age books. I think Herman P. Hunter's protagonist was put up against the Venom. And it sounded like, for example, those villains were very much designed to feel, like you said, like a normal person is helpless against them. Like, that was the whole point of the video, right? He picked out these, I guess they must be like noticeably tough as a reader for, reading along that story or whatever. They must stand out as tough or something if somebody's willing to make like videos like this and compare it. So, I can see why making like a strong, scary villain raises the stakes, right?
Yeah.
I haven't put that much thought into this particular aspect of villains. To tell you the truth, when I picture villains, man, it's actually really hard to put my finger on it because it's like it kind of more turns into like villainous situations. Does that make sense? Like villainous situations. It's never really clear, but it's just like, holy crap, what's unfolding right now? You know what I mean? I don't know how to explain that. Like,
what? I mean, my guess, just from what you said, is that your books are much less about like a clear delineation between like a hero and a villain, and more about like different characters dealing with, the two sides of themselves, like the more good side and the bad side.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, that's actually a good way to put it, because even my novel is also a reverse character arc. Like at the beginning, like, okay, so I did a lot of research in like symbolism, and like I studied stuff as far as like, because in my free time I like to like look at, a little bit of like my ancestry, like Pritchard, the last name, my last name Pritchard, where does that come from? Why? You know, and that leads me to the next thing. My family, you know, I grew up poor, so none of us really know anything about our family. My dad was like his mom was like adopted or something, you know what I mean? So it's all very amorphous, and I've kind of taken it upon myself to kind of investigate that, so you know, my family knows. And that's why I like gravitated towards the story of Boudica, for example, or like the Viking theme for A Saga of Sunsets. That's like a hearken to my wife and my son. They're very Nordic. I'm very Welsh, or like British. You know what I mean? So it's like the Celtic person and the Nord. Very ironic because they they kind of showed up and took all the gold and women and land. But yeah. Anyway, it's fascinating to delve into this kind of stuff. Like I said, I examine more situations. So the main character is very much like a symbol of like summer, fertility, freedom, stuff like that. Everybody likes her at the beginning. She's like a musician, you know, so she spreads music and happiness and joy. And this is like this summer figure. This mother goddess figure, this fertility goddess figure. And as the story unfolds, she slowly becomes like the Ice Queen. You know what I mean? And less fertile in the sense that her pregnancy is reaching like fruition, if that makes sense. Because she is pregnant. So in a sense, she's not fertile at all. It's kind of like a play on the symbolism. And I kind of will let like the lines blur like that just to create kind of a more abstract tapestry of like interwoven themes and stuff. So like, yeah, I won't really care where the Summer Queen ends and the Ice Queen begins, as long as it's like Ice Queen by the end, Summer Queen at the beginning. And yeah, I try to like, my whole point with this is I really do try to put a lot of thought into like the symbolism and stuff, and like you can do a lot of really cool foreshadowing that just like gives you goosebumps when you think about it. And then like when you pay it off later, it's like, oh, because all you're doing is saying the same thing that you were gonna say anyway. So to clarify, you could just write your whole book like you normally do, and during your editing process, you can go through and try to get really clever, right? Like with the like hiding things in there. It's like hiding M&Ms in your dog's mouth while he's sleeping. People, they'll wake up eventually during the book and realize there's been an M&M in their mouth the whole time, and they're like, "Oh, that's delicious. I'm so glad I remembered that," or whatever. Yeah. Just the way you word something, right? I love, like I pointed out the first line of the Queen Votisa story earlier, Gift of Ghosts. Alone, Queen Votisa emerged from the tree line. It's because like that can foreshadow so much. Like the queen truly was alone that entire story. No matter how many people she was surrounded by, she emerged from the tree line into a dead landscape and remained alone all the way to the end until she died alone. Even surrounded by things like, because like even when she emerges from the trees, she's surrounded by the trees to begin with. Think about it. All the trees are behind her when you emerge from a tree line. They're all standing behind you like soldiers, like ready. And it's a dead landscape in front of her. So it's like death, nothing but death awaits her. And all her people are standing behind her. But they're just trees, like hollow, lifeless, you know, soldiers that are just gonna grow towards whatever direction the sun is shining, if that makes sense. A little bit loose foreshadowing, but you can kind of see what I'm getting at.
Yeah. That kind of stuff is definitely probably one of my favorite, parts. Even though I generally don't enjoy like the writing process, like getting to put like those bits of foreshadowing in is fun. There's actually there's one line in the first book in Dawn that foreshadows a big reveal, and probably my guess is most people won't even remember it by the time they get to later books. But I'm kind of proud of that little line that's in there really early on.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Well, I would kind of give away the big reveal, but there's
as much as you can.
I mean, what it is so there's a talking sword in the book, and there's the talking sword, and the exile finds the sword, and so he's wielding the sword, and it's talking to him. And at one point, he basically he says something, kind of not really thinking much about it, and the sword gets like super pissed off at him, and he's like, "Don't say that." And at that point, you're like, you have no idea why the sword is mad. But then essentially, I guess it's the very end of book 2. At the very end of book 2, you get the big reveal. And if you happen to remember that line, you will understand why the sword is mad all the way back in book 1.
Yes. And you obviously don't have the character be like, so that's why you were mad.
Yeah,
I could see that going, making me insane rewriting that. Like I would feel like I'm talking to myself or something.
Yeah.
I feel
it's like I said, I imagine almost everyone will have forgotten, because it's literally just like one line, two lines, I guess. That's like in the middle of a scene where like other things are going on. So
yeah, I really like when you just like come up with a line and you're like, I know I'm gonna love that later, or like that just feels really satisfying to write, to see it there, to realize that I thought of it, or like just to know that that's there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
even though most people probably won't like get it, it's like you're proud that you like had that nice foreshadowing, like so far ahead or so far behind.
Right. And shout outs to Macapin. His name leads back to the Sons of the Blonde Ones, which, fun fact, the ancient people viewed people's skin color in very different ways. So for example, there was blonde people, but then also white people, and then there was like darker people, but they had a different term for it that I'm blanking on. I think they just called them, what they call them, I can't remember, but it was just like just kind of a term for like people from Africa, essentially. So we'll just call them African. But yeah, they differentiated white and blonde. So white was like Southern European and blonde was like Northern European, where there's a clear difference between like the almost albino, super blonde Aryan looking person, and then like basically like a brunette, slightly, somebody who's white but not pink. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? That would be like a white person when they're like not pink, but they're still white. That's how they viewed it. They called basically Northern Europeans were blonde people, and didn't necessarily.
Well, I mean, our modern, like the modern way that we categorize people is like we call people like white or black. Like we don't like distinguish the way like through most of history people did. Like a lot of different parts of Europe were distinguished from each other, like earlier times in history, whereas nowadays it tends to be more like we just say, oh, you're white or you're not white.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is now. It's just like two choices, and which just gets reduced to one question, like, well, are you white?
Yeah,
it's like, no, I'm blonde. They would melt down if you said that. They don't even know what you're talking about. But it's like, I just explained it to you. It's like, no, there's actually the ancients, quote unquote white people actually called other people whiter. Like, well, look at that blonde face over there. Blonde had nothing to do with your hair. It was just a term for like very white. Does that make sense?
I just saw Seabat's story.
Oh yeah. Want to elaborate? Want to comment? You have a comment? Thought?
My comment is, it's funny.
Yes. I agree. I absolutely love talking about this stuff, dude. It's kind of it's interesting seeing how simply you take the writing process and how much you trust yourself, because I think that's very important with authors, because otherwise you won't get shit done, right? You're on book 2. You're getting shit done. You got a legit artist. Shout outs to Neutron Bore.
Yep.
Book
Big
Neutron
shout out.
Bore. Yeah, does great work. Neutron
Everybody
Bore's-
go hire him.
And just to reiterate, in case anybody wants to even know, I know the chat probably knows, but like you can kind of see that. Yeah, very good stuff there. Go get Neutron Bore. But like my whole point, you know how to finish, you know how to follow through. You know what I mean? It's that I said the word simply with the writing process, but I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean like you're like, I know what I need to do. I know what I need to put down. And I'm going to keep moving forward and trust that like my themes will show in that, because you can keep a moment to moment mindset and kind of keep those themes in your subconscious. Like I pointed out the seashell, right? It happened. All the symbolism there happens to line up perfectly with exactly what you were hoping. And that was all just subconscious, because like you just trusted yourself, and there it is. That's just a great example right there.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that with the whole story, as long as you keep like, let's say you're like, okay, family and those, power, handle power responsibly, right? Family and power responsibly. If you just keep those in the back of your mind, everything will kind of gravitate towards that in the writing. But you have to trust yourself, and you have to also be pragmatic. Did you ever have to remind yourself of anything during the writing process of these? Like, oh yeah, this is actually like,
I mean, the main thing that I think, well, just like with drafting, I think the main thing to try to keep reminding yourself is, depending on which character you're writing, like what's the arc of this character for the book? And I think that's generally the most important thing, because even if you don't really know, like from an outline perspective, what's going to happen, if you have a good grasp on the character's character arc, you can just kind of wing it and get to where you want to be, even without an outline. Although I will say, I think it's a good idea to always have some kind of outline.
yeah. I think the best, I don't know what it is with everything these days, telling people that it's one way or the other, or this is the only way, or this is like the best way, which kind of encourages people to be like, well, I don't need to look into anything else yet. You know what I mean? I don't know why they're so quick to be like, well, you're either a pantser or you're a plot, one or the other. Either don't write a plot at all, or da 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 da. It's like, no, dude, it's actually like the best of both, because you're not going to get like organic dialogue if you don't figure out how to enter like some sort of flow state and imagine this freaking conversation. Part of that, while you're creating the outline, which looks something a lot like a screenplay, you're kind of in this flow state and you're pantsing. There's an element of freaking pantsing the entire time, and that includes when you're writing the freaking outline. So like, it's a lie if anybody says it's one or the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the truth is that everyone is a pantser, because you have to make it up at some point. It's whether do you pants your way through an outline and then use the outline to write your book, or you just pants your way through the draft. So, like, I understand why we make a distinction, but like, the reality is everyone makes it up at some point.
Yep, that's true. And that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, basically, I will come up with my outline, and then now you kind of have like a blueprint, right? Who's going to build a house without a blueprint? And that's what you're doing, especially with like a full-length novel. You're telling me a novel isn't as complicated as a house? No, dude. A house seems pretty complicated, but to actually write a good, successful, like entertaining novel, it's about as complicated, I would say, as like the ins and outs of building a freaking house. You need a good foundation, which is like the ideas, everything, all the ideas surrounding this story. Like that's kind of your foundation, is like the ingredients put into it. Is it even going to stand? Is it even going to like get people's attention? Stuff like that. And that's just the foundation. You can keep going with like the windows and the walls and the roof and all that. But yeah. I mean, I feel like people the reality is yeah, we're all pantsers, and you're actually kind of a little silly if you're not going to plan something. Planning something, like you don't know anything that's going to happen in your book, and you're just taking it scene by scene. Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what's that going to turn out like? And the thought
Yeah.
kind of makes me cringe.
I mean, I find that like if I try to pants my way through like a draft, that I mean I do okay, but I can never get any of those like really big like cathartic moments to happen by just like making it up as I go along. That's the kind of stuff that you can get from making a nice outline before you start.
Yeah. And then, what's really cool is like once you get that outline out, you remember what I was saying earlier about those foreshadowing lines with like the symbolism, the opening line of every scene or chapter can mean a lot. Certain lines can like mean a lot. Well, if you have a freaking outline, well, a lot of like kind of specific stuff that's going to happen, like based on like that one line or one paragraph description that you wrote in the paragraph. So you can kind of like, like if your protagonist is destined to become the hero of time, like Link, like the Legend of Zelda, right? He's the hero of time. You could do a lot of stuff using the word hero and like the word time and like synonyms for those two things with the opening lines, like so many things. And then you can pay it off. Like if you know any specifics, like when he actually becomes the hero of time, let's say, he's pulling the sword out of the stone, just like Ocarina of Time, right? That's what he did, is he pulled the master sword out of the stone. You could have very similar things happening like early on in the story that aren't quite that people could easily miss. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would probably try to do is like I would have something like he's got the sword stuck in a tree and he actually can't pull it out for some reason, like early in the story, which is a kind of a way to, I think, slightly less obviously like foreshadow that, because like the really obvious thing, right, is you show like Link pulling a sword out of a tree or something, like he's doing the exact action kind of,
or like churning butter.
Yeah, but if you make it a failure foreshadowing, I think that's stronger.
Yeah.
So instead of it, okay, we're foreshadowing he's going to pull a sword out, we start off by foreshadowing him struggling and not being able to do that thing.
100%. Yeah, he gets his sword stuck in a tree and then like he can't get it out. Oh my gosh, that's actually kind of an awesome way to start it. Or he's like, maybe he's trying to chop wood, he gets his axe stuck in the tree.
Yeah, I mean, you could make it less like obvious by doing that.
But I mean, that right there, dude, now compare the same story, even the same quality of writing, but just without that, right? It's like it's just like it's like frosting on top. It's like some sprinkles, you know what I mean? It's like just that little, it's like the sharp edge to it, I don't know. I love doing that stuff. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, it's the kind of thing that like there's a story feeling like a story because like the events follow one another and they make sense. But there's also like a story feeling like a story because when the reader reads it, they feel like there's a connection between like the beginning and the middle and the end in terms of like you said, like these foreshadowing events. Like even though like in real life, we don't necessarily like have this kind of stuff happen. Like it might, maybe it's more like chance, but in a story, when these things happen, it feels more like a cohesive thing to a reader than if it was just a series of events that make sense.
100%. Yeah, you need it to make sense because that's how a trope can become a cliche. It's like, a genre is just a collection of tropes, and a trope done badly is a cliche, and it's a cliche because it's a trope, and because it's a trope, we know it's a cliche because it's done badly, because we've seen so many other cultural examples of people doing this badly. And the reason it hurts so much, it's painful when we see a cliche, is because it is cultural, right? It's ingrained into the culture. So you have like the magic sword, Excalibur, lightsaber. You have Stormbringer from Elric of Nibelheim. I think it's Stormbringer. All the magic swords. Insert every single magic sword. That is a cultural thing, brother. Like, and for anybody to look at all those magic swords and to say that that's not a cultural thing, and then wonder why people say, you know, something is crappy if someone abuses the idea of like a magical sword, that's like breaching a social contract it's like breaching a cultural contract, you know, even if like the author thinks it's cool, or they're like too blind to see how they like messed up in some way. Doesn't stop the people from feeling how they feel or whatever. Like it becomes a cliche when you do it badly, right? Is my whole point. So I mean, as long as you do things correctly, you know, I think it's important to touch on those things. Now, I forgot what we were just talking about. I brought up the tropes though for that reason. We were just touching on something relevant. It was like with storytelling. Do you remember?
I mean, I think we were just kind of talking about like tropes and foreshadow, or you're talking more about foreshadowing, I think.
Yeah, like the sword and the stone, the axe and the tree.
Yeah.
If you fail at it, like you were saying, yeah. That's why. So this is like where a trope can come in handy. You know, like you can easily fail at it if it's like if you're hitting us over the head with it. You know, like then it becomes a stereotype, and then now when you have him like, oh, he becomes the hero of time by pulling the sword out of the stone later in the story. Yeah. Then it's like, oh, cool, eye roll. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think readers enjoy the foreshadowing when they only understand it looking backwards. If they read it and they realize what they're reading is foreshadowing, is when I think they get annoyed, right? So that's why I think like your example of like instead of having a sword stuck in a tree, you have an axe stuck in a tree, because I think that's the kind of thing where the reader's not going to realize in the moment that they're reading foreshadowing, but then when they get to the future and then they remember, they look back on the story, they're like, oh, that was foreshadowing. That's what they enjoy.
Exactly. It's actually if somebody did this right now in their story, it would be good writing to replace the sword with the axe in the beginning, because okay, if you have a sword stuck in a tree, you thought of it, okay, you as in the author, right? You thought of a tree because it's something that a blade can get stuck in, but it doesn't make sense for a sword to be in a tree to begin with. So now you have to contrive an entire scene for him to have the freaking sword stuck in a tree, when you could just have him collecting firewood, and then it makes sense that the axe is stuck in the tree. And now you're being a little sneaky about it, and which actually, since you don't have to think about any of that extra stuff, and it's all built for you right there, now you can start playing around with the wording, and you can like say something about time in the description, about how something about time went on. Oh, my axe is stuck. I got to pull really hard and get it out. Oh, I can't do it. Maybe someday I'll be strong enough to do it. Whatever it is, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That stuff really just puts the sauce on, in my opinion.
Yeah, so, definitely.
But some people hate that. Like my co-host Bat Sauce, he just read my book, and I think something I struggle with is I have so much going on in my head that I don't realize how quickly I'm jumping to the next thing, and I'm dumping so much like information while still moving forward. It's like the opposite of like an exercise machine where you're running in place. I'm literally like continuously moving, and there's all these things that we're passing that you might have questions about. You know what I mean? Where I'm just kind of like tossing it out there as we go. And yeah, there's power in that simplicity. It's my whole point that I'm getting at. If you can have like a simple story through and through where people are kind of following it, and then you have that axe scene that we just discovered, you can kind of get the best of both worlds, where you can still have some cool symbolism as long as you don't lay it on too thick in the moments. Because if it's happening less often, and less poetically, then people are, you know, more likely to identify it. Because like, oh, this is a simple story. Now all of a sudden you're starting to describe everything all poetic, and you're zooming in on this idea of like whatever's happening. All of a sudden, people are going to be like, why is he doing this? And then it goes back to simple. They're going to expect something big to happen out of that. It's almost like you're signaling them that you're foreshadowing. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I end up like just being kind of poetic throughout, and I think it adds a level of density to my stuff.
Hey, can you mute that for 2 seconds?
Yep.
Anvil. Perfect.
Nice. Nice. Nice.
It is now.
Okay, and yeah, he had it muted, so I was talking this whole fucking time on mute. God damn it,
I'm so sorry.
you asshole. So how's it going?
Going great.
I'm not repeating myself. I can't even believe that.
I hate when
Yeah. So I got caught in traffic on my way back. So when I got home, I had one of our dogs with us. I had to feed him, and so I was late to the stream. And then our son's just been going ape shit, and he just like he's so clingy. He just wants me, fucking Carol Baskin. He just wants me to hold him, but he wants to struggle with me and kick me the whole time, and it's just crazy town. So I'm over him, man, in the best way possible. So yeah, what'd I miss? What'd you guys talk about?
We talked about everything.
All the good things about storytelling and writing.
Yep. Getting axes stuck in trees.
Did you, before you started writing, did you do a lot of research, or did you just kind of wing it, or did you take like creative writing in school, or how'd you really get into it?
I mean, mostly I just started writing stories. I think I wrote 5 or 6 stories before my first published book. So basically, I guess it was just me practicing writing, because I'd never really tried it before. I'd read a lot of books, but never tried writing.
I don't know why it keeps muting me. What the fuck, dude? You're like looking and I'm like, why aren't you answering me? And then I see it's muted, but I didn't even touch it. I responded to the chat and Andy wasn't here to mute it. So did you like writing as a kid, like in school when you had to write papers and shit like that? Or does it come mostly from appreciating other stories?
No, I hated writing. I still don't really like it. I was talking to, we were talking about it earlier, and I just said that like I don't really enjoy like drafting or even editing that much, which is kind of weird to say, having published several books, but yeah, like that aspect of it is not super fun for me. I really just enjoy the finished thing, I guess, and being able to get it out there and let other people read and enjoy it, and then hear their thoughts on the story is what's really enjoyable.
Yeah. Would you have someone type for you if you could? And just like spoken word to them?
Probably not. I think my own kind of philosophy on like the creative process is that the struggle and the kind of pain of doing it is part of it. So even though like it's not super enjoyable for me most of the time when I'm writing, I kind of feel like that's part of the process of creating something like meaningful. So
That makes sense.
a little bit in the way of like when you're working out, it's not necessarily fun to be like lifting heavy weights, but and it can be painful in certain ways, but at the same time that is like required if you're wanting to like get stronger or build muscle or whatever.
Yeah, and you feel good and accomplished after, and
yeah,
the result.
And it's the same way too. Like I don't really enjoy in the moment of writing, but when you finish a writing session for the day, you feel really good about the work you got done. So
yeah. Can you write while you're listening to music?
Yeah. I think what usually happens though is like once I get going, like I completely like zone out and I'm not like hearing the music at all. So I don't know if that counts as listening to music.
Yeah. Well, like with Andy, he likes to do instrumental because otherwise the lyrics distract him. He's gotten good at it because I'll listen to a lot with lyrics, and I mean most of the time I let him listen to whatever, but he'll be writing in the car and I'll have whatever on and he kind of tunes it out too, but he's just said that it can be distracting. So yeah, instrumental, like he'll put on Polyphia is a good one where it's kind of like metal with almost like a funky bass line and shit like that. It's pretty good.
Yeah, like funky instrumental metal.
Yeah.
There's also Andromeda, Dark Twin.
If you're into metal music, that is.
Dark Twin's really good. I've been getting into them lately. So.
What kind of music do you like?
I listen to a lot of like just orchestral type music, like a lot of soundtracks or soundtrack like sounding. And usually because like that type of music tends to it gets me in like the right mood for writing, and sometimes it'll give me like ideas.
Yeah.
So
I can totally see that. Like if it's movie music type stuff, for sure. You can like play the scene out in your head and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a lot of it's because like that music has been specifically kind of made to fit with a story. And so it works in that way.
Yeah. No, McCopp and Bates, Jesus. Bates can't read.
Bates can't read. Wait, Bates can read? I'm gonna call him Bates now. Also, hail
my fucking
Richard from
problem.
Iron Age Media. How's Anvil Magazine #4 coming? People can pick that up at anvilmagazine.com, right? I think so. I don't know. So yeah, have you are you in any of the Anvils? Speaking of that,
No,
yeah.
I've thought about submitting several times, but
I'm gonna send you a meme to put up here.
it's always like I could be writing something to submit, or I could just be getting more work done on my books, and so I just end up getting more work done on my books.
Yeah, I hear you.
So,
I was in between. Like I had just finished my novel, and I was like, well, what do I do next? And I still had all this momentum built up in me to to write. So I pumped out Mortal Descent, riding off of the steam of my novel and some other stuff for Anvil. That's where my comic comes from. I think that's still some freaking steam that I had left over from my novel was the comic that I got in there. But I think what I want to do is kind of, and I mean, I haven't even talked to Richard about this. He's in the chat. He might be listening. What I'd like to do is just like, at least for Mortal Descent or just that series of RK Chronicles, since they're all short stories, I would like to it would be cool to steadily release essentially issues of the comic through Anvil and then release a graphic novel after the fact instead of issues, right?
yeah, that'd be
have a
cool.
complete product, but kind of reveal the story through different issues of Anvil. I don't know. It's like a dreamer goal, I'd like to do that. But I think I need to get familiar with Fund My Comic first. I have everything I need to get my first comic on there. I just need to do it.
I've got something to share with the chat. He's gonna pull it up.
Yeah, have you thought about comics at all?
I thought about it a little bit. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess if someone who had more experience doing it approached me and wanted to work with me on doing something, I'd be interested, but it's just it would take a lot of time, and I would be having to relearn stuff in a different medium. So I don't know if I'd want to do it unless I had someone else who was experienced and really wanted me to help. So
hell yeah. I think it would be, I think you're just looking at your covers, it kind of is yearning for it.
Yeah.
I mean, see it.
But yeah, the Silver Empire series, they would make really good comics because there's just a lot of action in it, and a lot of the coolness of the action is hard to capture in novel form, whereas you could show it a lot better in a comic.
Yeah, that's true. I could see an animated version of your story too.
Yeah. I mean, when I was coming up with it, I thought a lot about the visuals, even though I knew I was writing a book. But I thought a lot about how characters would look if they were shown rather than written. I mean, you can tell the covers are super colorful, and that's on purpose. I wanted to make a world where there's a lot of color rather than what usually you get with medieval style stories where it's all brown and gray.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, the color, it's kind of a little bit of a signal hey, colorful story, as in stick around to the end. As in beauty, right? Goodness. Kind of what I interpret.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
richness is a very vibrant world.
Because think about super nihilistic, pulpy noir. It's black, white, red for blood. Boom. That's all that's in it. Because that's all that's in it. right? And it makes sense. Yeah, it's like black, darkness, blood, violence, murder, mayhem. I don't know. And then with yours, it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, even with the aspects on your cover, like lightning and a sword, it almost seems less violent than something as simple as like a noir cover with just that color scheme and like maybe like a gun or like nothing on there except words and a blood splatter, right? You could, I don't know, and you got like a freaking sword and like lightning and stuff, but because it's all colorful and portrayed in a certain way, I think it kind of communicates certain things.
Yeah. I mean, some of it is well, not some of it. A lot of it is meant to be for potential new readers, right? Who are just looking at the cover, have no idea what it is. I wanted to, quickly communicate kind of what they are going to get if they actually start reading the story. So
yeah,
I feel like I have a dog hair in my throat.
Oh, I hate
marketing
that.
stuff.
Yeah. No, I quickly. So my original cover for Mortal Descent is, I went hyper simplistic. I went like, because it's all just grassroots, me self-publishing, figuring it out, learning and stuff. I was just like, very simple. I'm going to put my world on the front and one of the moons on the back, and it'll have the words, and that's all you really need for a cover, because that's not the point for me. It's about the story, right? But something I came to realize, like, that's a perfectly good cover, and now it's kind of like a mark of authenticity. It's like one of the original first edition covers of the book, because I've since replaced all 3 versions with updated covers. For what I'm about to say is, like, I came to realize that like it or not, you need to convey a certain idea with your book cover. No matter who you are, you need to convey what your book is about, because not everybody can just be like, that, I don't know, the dime a dozen, like, I don't even know what to call them. The commercial authors, I don't know, because they're all in like paperback books, but like the dime a dozen commercial authors where all they have is like words on their cover, and like that's it, right? We've all seen those. Or like, how about all the fantasy books where it's just a sword on the cover and words, right? I get the sword conveys a certain medieval aspect, but it doesn't necessarily convey fantasy. It's just like Western culture will assume that it's probably fantasy, right? But my whole point being is, like, if you really want like people to kind of like, because like, think about it, even without the sword, the fantasy fan is just going to see a book with words and keep walking. They're going to keep on walking by. With the sword, a percentage of fantasy fans will stop and at least look at it, right? But with a sword and a dragon and something that resembles your protagonist, all in the same elements of the same book, now like most of the fantasy fans are at least going to look at it. Like, they're at least going to check it out. Like, what's this about? You know what I mean? Because you have like the fantasy aspects on it. Now that's a very direct example, but you should look at your story like you've clearly done with your covers. This is why I'm talking to you about it, by the way, is because you've done a good job. I don't mean to bury the lead. But you do need to think about your story and like convey it. You need to convey it in everything about your story, not just the words, but not just the blurb. I thought I could get away with just like the blurb and a simplistic cover. No, the reason only the big names do the simplistic covers is because they're big names and they don't have to say anything about their book, because you already know what the whole book is about, because you watched the shitty remake on TV already. You know what I mean? So they can have a blank book cover that just says the book, that just says the story title, because shit on you, because you're not royalty, right?
Poopy on you.
Yeah. So yeah, I can't. Anyway, I came to realize you need to communicate everything out of the get-go, even if you don't like it, even if you think it's not about the book cover, it's about the story. Something as innocuous or innocent as that, whatever the thought process is that's making you not put too much thought into the book cover needs to be reminded that, like, no. Even people who are fans of your book, those people specifically need to know that it exists and kind of what it's about at a glance. So that means conveying setting. That means conveying a little bit of plot and probably the main character. If you can just show all those elements in some way, you can figure it out. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
This has been on my mind a lot because I try to make a custom book cover for each of my episodes of Spirit Animals ever since I published the book. And I've been dabbling in poster creation, as in I did Jared Christman's poster for Missouri Bill, his film, and a few other things, like just design work in general. It's like, once I realized my simplistic cover wouldn't do, I was like, no, I need to like figure out how to communicate visually and make like covers, man. I got to figure out how to make something passable that communicates my story. You know, I feel like I've kind of achieved.
I think, I mean, I think if you can have your cover be some kind of visual hook, that is really powerful for, you know, converting people into readers, or at least getting them to try. They may not finish the book, but and so like I said, that was like when I was planning out the story, I was thinking like about the visuals of how the characters would look, not just because of the cover, but the cover was definitely part of it. So I knew I would want a cover that would be really eye-catching, and that would also be clear as to, you know, the genre, or at least give kind of a promise as to what the genre would be like. So
yeah, I wanted to convey my world, right? Think about it. That simplistic cover, I was like, my world, which conveys a certain amount of stuff about my world, but nothing about it said fantasy. It actually made it look more sci-fi than anything.
Yeah, usually planet, people, when they see planet, they think sci-fi. So.
Yeah, dude. So it made it look more sci-fi than anything. And it didn't tell you anything about what happens in between the cover and the back. It didn't tell you what happens right here in the book, inside the book. Nothing about that. It just shows you a planet and a moon, right? And I was like, I do see this as a flaw, even though it's technically not like bad, right? But you know, I just took it as a learning opportunity and evolved from there. So
that's a lot of what indie publishing is lots of learning, lots of making mistakes and learning from your mistakes.
Yeah, I very quickly realized, I'm like, how can I convey fantasy with a single element on the cover? That word, just that question alone is actually pretty nuts when it comes to like a book cover, or just like out of the blue. Most, because like look at what I said earlier. I was just like, a sword and a dragon. Done, right? You got the dragon, you're good. You're good with the dragon. But not everybody wants dragons. Actually, I saw something recently on X. It was like, one thing has to go, right? And it was a bunch of tropes. It was like 4 different tropes. One of them was a dragon, and I think dragon won. So like more people wanted like a dragon to go than like the chosen one. Was that you?
Yeah, that was my post.
It was your post. Yeah.
Actually, way more people wanted the chosen one.
That's right. That's what it was.
I think Dragon was second. Dragon was second most that people didn't.
I thought it would have been last, bro. Dragon, I thought that would have been last. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, well, the thing you got to remember is that a lot of people that post on X are not representative of the like wider like fantasy readership. A lot of them are like authors or aspiring authors, or just not your typical reader. So I always take it with a little bit of grain of salt as to like what people say on there.
That's a good idea.
Right.
Because I think probably the majority of fantasy readers still really like dragons.
I agree. I agree. It just kind of got my wheels turning a little bit about like fantasy without dragons. Because like One of the things I definitely was the most excited about was dragon-related stuff, as far as fantasy goes. Why do I like dragons so much? It's like culturally everywhere, just throughout all of human time. Dragons always been there, and then even like in modern times, it all keeps carrying forward, and it's been in like every culture. So like, there's a reason why I personally like to talk about dragons and dragon-like things. I reveal a dragon in Mortal Descent, and there's not one in my novel. And actually, they're being talked about like almost mythical in the novel. So I enjoyed revealing that in Mortal Descent. I was like, I'm actually going to just do it. I was like,
there's dragons in my series too, although at this point, I think they've only been like referenced once or twice, and you've never seen one at this point.
Right.
But they're definitely in there. But they're also way more of the Eastern style of dragon, so there's certain elements that are different about them. And
Shenron.
What?
Oh, Shenron from Dragon Ball Z.
Sort of. I think a lot of like the big difference is more of like that the dragons in this series are almost like a spiritual creature, whereas like in a lot of Western fantasy, a dragon is like an animal. It's way more of like an animal.
Yeah, for sure. They're more deified in the East, and they're definitely more bestial in the West. It's fascinating, actually.
Yeah. Well, I will have to be going here pretty soon.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I wish I love talking about this stuff, but I also have to get up super early in the morning.
Well, brother, we broke 2 hours. That's pretty damn good. I usually hope for at least one, so that's double what I hope for. So I appreciate you sticking around.
Thanks for coming on. It was nice to meet you face to face. I'm sorry about my mic issues and my tardiness and not being here for our son. So we appreciate you bearing with us.
It's all good.
Yeah, if there's any, oh, sorry, go.
I didn't have anything else to say.
It's good.
Yeah, it's good to have you on, and it's always, whenever you want to come on is cool. And if you ever want to do a watch-worthy where we watch the funny or random videos and commentary on that, you're always welcome. So.
Yeah, dude. Include us on your parade of podcasts to join whenever you release a book or whatever. We'll love to have you on.
I'll add you to the list.
Yeah. If there's any last minute things you'd like to plug or shout out, you can feel free to do that. But otherwise, we'll just play the outro whenever you're ready.
Only thing I'll shout out 2 things. One,
yes,
new book, Shadows Within, releases the 1st of June, but you can pre-order it right now. And then I'm also going to shout out Neutron Boar. He made the cover, obviously.
Yes.
And he did all. This book too has more interior artwork. I think 5 pieces. I think I definitely like these new pieces of art better than the stuff from book 1. But I like it all. But he did a really good job with the interior artwork on this one. So definitely get the paperback to enjoy fully all of that stuff. But
hell yeah,
that's it.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm just gonna say you can leave us a review on Spotify. That helps us out a lot as far as the show's growth. That would be Pritchard Pub Podcast on Spotify. You can take the show with you on the road at pritchardpub.substack.com, and
Did we say where to find him?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. On X, right? Timo Burnham.
Yep.
Pretty simple.
That's
yeah.
it? Okay.
Yeah.
That is me.
And that's all into the
I don't know if he
description.
had a Substack or
Oh yeah, he plugged his stuff.
Okay, good.
It's all good. And thanks again for coming by, brother. Until next time.
Thanks for having me.
Peace.